A package delivered to the wrong address. But what was inside would change an entire town. One small-town post office received a package that had been on a journey for decades. Inside was a dusty case holding a Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest honor for valor. But this medal had never been delivered. Why had it gone missing for so many years? Who did it belong to? And the biggest question of all, was the hero still alive? Welcome to The Last Stand, where we tell the stories of forgotten courage, quiet sacrifice, and the honor that refuses to fade. Today, we follow the journey of a medal that arrived at the wrong address but found the right people. A small town will rise to track down a lost hero, and an honor left waiting for decades will finally be restored. Because some medals are not just made of metal, they are forged in memory. The post office in the little town opened on a quiet Tuesday morning the same way it always did. A few bills, some grocery flyers, a couple of small packages, nothing unusual. Until mail clerk Ruth came across a box unlike the others. It was dusty, its corners softened from years of handling, with faded stamps covering its surface. The address read, 22 Main Street, Carterville. But there hadn't been a 22 Main Street for years. That house was long gone, replaced by an empty lot. Curious, Ruth carried the box to the back, carefully sliced the tape, and lifted the lid. Inside was a small velvet case, worn but intact. She brushed away the dust, and gold letters emerged across the cover. United States Army, Distinguished Service Cross. Ruth gasped. This was no ordinary package. The Distinguished Service Cross was the nation's second highest decoration for heroism. She opened the case. Nestled inside was a heavy medal, its bronze arms glinting in the light, a fierce eagle at its center. Below it, a nameplate was engraved. Private First Class, Jonathan Miller. Ruth whispered, "My God, how did this end up here?" The postmaster leaned over her shoulder. "This belongs to the Army, or to a family. We can't just shelve it. Someone has been waiting for this." But in a town like Carterville, news traveled faster than any mail. By the next morning, the story of the mysterious package had already spread from the post office to the coffee shop to every church pew. Some kind of medal showed up. "They say it's for a man named Jonathan Miller. Never heard of him. Maybe he died in Vietnam. What if he didn't?" The Carterville Chronicle wasted no time. Its headline the following day read, "Hero's Medal Delivered Decades Late Mystery in Carterville." Everyone was suddenly asking, who was Jonathan Miller? An old man at the diner shook his head. "I remember hearing that name once. Long time ago. Korea? Vietnam? Not sure." The velvet case wasn't alone. Inside the package was a folded yellow sheet of paper. At the top it read, "Citation for Valor." The words described Miller's actions in detail. Under heavy fire, he'd carried wounded men to safety, returning again and again into the line of fire. But at the bottom, in faded typewriter ink, were two words, "Delivery pending." Emily, the town librarian, stared at the page. That means it was never presented. The medal was approved, but it never reached him. The room fell silent. A hero recognized, but never honored. By the end of the week, the medal had become the only topic anyone wanted to discuss. At the diner, voices rose. If he earned it, he deserves it. Maybe his family's out there. We should find them. What if Miller himself is still alive? At the local school, a teacher used the story as a lesson. "Class, sometimes bravery goes unnoticed. Our job is to remember those who gave more than they had to give." The children leaned in, eyes wide, as though it were the start of a treasure hunt. The town had not felt so united in years. Emily spent late nights at the library, combing through old newspapers. One headline from 1969 jumped out. "Local soldier Jonathan Miller deployed to Vietnam." And then, nothing. No return, no obituary, no ceremony. She checked municipal records. No trace. It was as if Jonathan Miller had marched off to war and vanished from history. Within days, the question echoed everywhere. Why was this medal never delivered? Who was Jonathan Miller? And is he still alive? Ruth, who had first opened the package, felt tears sting her eyes as she spoke at the town hall. "This medal didn't just fall into my hands by mistake. It came here for a reason, and until we find Jonathan Miller or his family, we can't rest." The people of Carterville nodded. For the first time in decades, the town shared a mission. For weeks, Carterville buzzed with a single name: Jonathan Miller. The medal had turned him from a forgotten soldier into the center of a town's imagination, but no one could say who he truly was. Librarian Emily spread the yellowed newspaper clipping across the library table. "Here it is," she said. A 1,969 article, Jonathan Miller deployed to Vietnam. But there's no follow-up, no return story, no obituary, just silence. The town's history club took up the case like detectives. Letters went out to veterans associations, military archives, even old high school alumni groups. They pored over records, searching for any mention of the name. What they found was little, but it was enough to fan the fire of curiosity. A week later, Emily received a letter in the mail. The return address was the National Archives. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Yes, there was a private first-class Jonathan Miller, the letter confirmed. He served in Vietnam. In 1970, during a siege, he displayed extraordinary bravery rescuing fellow soldiers under fire. The Distinguished Service Cross was approved in his name. However, records indicate the medal was never delivered. Emily read the letter aloud at the coffee shop. The room fell silent. Someone finally whispered, "So he really was a hero." Within days, more leads surfaced. Online forums dedicated to Vietnam veterans began lighting up with comments. One caught everyone's eye. "Name's Thomas Reed. I served with Jonathan Miller. If you've got his medal, let me tell you he earned it. That night, he saved lives. Then he disappeared. When we came home, Miller was just gone. Never saw him again." The message was printed and pinned to the bulletin board at the diner. Folks gathered around to read it, shaking their heads in disbelief. "He really was one of us," someone said softly. Soon, the search became bigger than just Emily and a handful of volunteers. The entire town pitched in. Students started a Find Jonathan project at school. Children flipped through their grandparents' photo albums, looking for a familiar face. One woman brought in an old high school yearbook. On the faded page, under the class of 1,966, there he was, Jonathan Miller. A shy smile, quiet eyes, barely more than a boy. "Now I remember," an elderly man murmured. His father was the carpenter down on Pine Street. Jonathan kept to himself, never thought he'd end up in the papers. City Hall records showed that the Miller family had moved away years ago. No forwarding address, no property records, nothing. But Emily wasn't ready to quit. She filed a formal request with federal archives. Weeks later, a brown envelope arrived. Inside was a typed report: Jonathan Miller, born 1948, last known address, Montana, 1982, current status, unknown. The news rippled through Carterville. If he had an address in 1982, it meant he had survived the war. But what had happened in the 40 years since? The townspeople gathered again, this time in the old community hall. Everyone wanted answers. "We have to find him. If he's gone, then his family should receive the medal. If he's alive, we owe him more than this." Finally, Ruth stood. She had been the first to open the package, and she spoke with conviction. "This medal didn't land in Carterville by chance. It came to us with a purpose, and that purpose is clear. We must bring it to Jonathan Miller, wherever he is." Applause filled the hall. Not long after, another envelope arrived, this one stamped from Washington, D.C. Inside was an official note: Distinguished Service Cross awarded to PFC Jonathan Miller. Status: pending delivery. Last known residence: rural Montana, 1982. This was the break they had been waiting for. He hadn't vanished completely. He had lived, at least long enough to put down an address. And if he had lived then, perhaps he lived still. By now, Carterville had transformed. The search for Jonathan Miller had become a shared mission. In classrooms, children whispered about him. In churches, his name was spoken in prayer. At the diner, maps of Montana lay spread across tables with fingers tracing possible routes. The questions echoed louder than ever. Why didn't he claim his medal? Why did he disappear? And where is he now? The people of Carterville didn't know the answers yet. But they knew this much: they would not stop until the medal, and the honor it carried, found its rightful home. For weeks, Carterville lived with one question hanging in the air. Was Jonathan Miller still alive? The lead from Washington pointed to a Montana address. It wasn't much, but it was enough to set a group of townspeople on the road. Ruth, Emily, and retired schoolteacher Mark volunteered to go. For them, this wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a duty. The drive was long miles of endless highway, then winding roads through rugged hills. At every rest stop, they opened the velvet case, staring at the metal inside, as if it were a compass guiding them forward. Finally, they reached a weathered farmhouse on the edge of a small Montana town. The porch sagged, the paint was chipped, and weeds swallowed the yard. It looked abandoned. Mark knocked on the door. For a moment, nothing. Then a faint, raspy voice. "Who's there?" Ruth's heart pounded. "Are you Jonathan Miller?" The door creaked open. Standing before them was a frail man with snow-white hair, a stooped back, and eyes that still carried the sharpness of a soldier. "That's me," the man said flatly. "What do you want?" Ruth stepped forward, holding out the case. "Mr. Miller, this belongs to you, the Distinguished Service Cross. It never reached you." Jonathan's gaze fell on the metal. His lips trembled, but his hands stayed at his sides. "I don't want it," he said, his voice low and firm. Emily blinked in shock. "But you earned it. The whole town came together to return it to you." Jonathan shook his head. "I'm no hero. Not then, not now." Inside, the house was dim, curtains drawn tight against the daylight. The walls were bare, no photos, no memorabilia, no trace of the war that had defined his youth. Jonathan lowered himself into a chair, sighing heavily. "That night, yes, I pulled men out of the fire. But not all of them. Some never made it home. They pinned a medal on me for bravery, but all I felt was failure. That medal belongs with the dead, not me." His voice cracked. His eyes stared past them, lost in memories no one else could see. Ruth leaned forward, her voice soft but steady. "Mr. Miller, when we found this medal, it didn't just speak to you. It spoke to all of us. The children at school know your name now. The town remembers you. Even if you can't carry it, maybe we can." Mark added gently, "Heroism isn't about forgetting the ones you lost. It's about honoring them by remembering. That's what this medal means." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "You don't know what it's like to carry ghosts." Emily met his eyes. "Maybe not, but we know what it means to honor them. And without you, those men's courage would have died on that field. You brought them home. That's why this belongs to you." Silence hung heavy. Jonathan's hands trembled as he finally reached for the case. He opened it slowly, staring at the metal as if it might burn him. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, in a whisper, "I spent 50 years running from this. Maybe it's time I stopped." Tears welled in his eyes. He pressed the metal to his chest, his voice breaking. "I'll accept it, not for me, for the ones who didn't come back." The group returned to Carterville days later, exhausted but triumphant. The town square was filled with people waiting. Ruth held the case high and declared, "We found him, and he accepted." Cheers broke out, mingled with tears. For the first time, the people of Carterville felt that their search had restored something greater than a medal. It had restored a man's place in history. Jonathan Miller's story was no longer one of silence. It was about to be told, out loud, in front of everyone. And for that, the town prepared something special, a ceremony worthy of a hero. The town square of Carterville hadn't seen a crowd like this in decades. Flags lined the streets, folding chairs filled the square, and neighbors who rarely spoke now stood shoulder to shoulder. From the mayor to the school children, from the church choir to veterans from neighboring towns, they were all there for one reason: to honor Jonathan Miller. Ruth, the post clerk who had first opened the mysterious package, stepped to the podium. Her hands shook as she looked at the crowd. "This medal arrived at my desk as if by accident," she said. "But I believe it wasn't an accident at all. It was a calling. It reminded us that heroes can be forgotten, but they should never remain so. And today, we make that right." The crowd broke into applause, many wiping tears from their eyes. A hush fell as an old man appeared at the edge of the square. Jonathan Miller, leaning on a cane, took slow, deliberate steps forward. His jacket was pressed, a tiny American flag pinned to his lapel. For decades, he had hidden from the world. Now, The world stood waiting for him. The crowd rose to its feet. Children waved flags. Some veterans saluted. Mothers held their children a little closer. Jonathan reached the podium and spoke softly, almost a whisper. "I am not a hero," he said. "I was simply there when I had to be. I acted for my brothers. That's all." But from the crowd came a single shout, strong and certain. "You are our hero." The words rippled through the square like a wave. The mayor lifted the velvet case and opened it. Sunlight glinted off the Distinguished Service Cross. Jonathan's hands trembled as he finally accepted what had once felt unbearable. He pinned it to his chest and paused, overcome. His voice broke as he whispered, "This medal isn't mine alone. It belongs to the ones who didn't come home." He looked up at the faces before him. "From this day on, I carry it for them." The square erupted with applause and tears. One by one, townspeople came forward. Children shook his hand. Old men embraced him. Mothers whispered, "Thank you." For years, Jonathan had lived in isolation, convinced he had been forgotten. Now, for the first time, he felt the warmth of belonging. The medal wasn't just pinned to his chest, it was etched into the heart of Carterville. He raised the microphone again, his voice steadier this time. "For 50 years, I kept quiet. I thought silence would make the pain fade. But I was wrong. Silence makes us forget, and forgetting is heavier than grief. You reminded me today that I was never truly alone. And that courage, even when buried, can still live again. This medal is not mine, it is ours, because no one carries heroism alone." The crowd listened in reverent silence, then erupted in cheers once more. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Jonathan stood with Ruth and Emily on the ridge overlooking the town. The medal gleamed against his chest as he gazed into the horizon. "For years I ran from this," he admitted softly. "But now, I feel them with me again, the ones I left behind, and I feel you all beside me too." Emily smiled. "Your story is no longer silent, Jonathan, and it never will be again." The veteran placed his hand over the medal, eyes glistening in the fading light. For the first time in decades, he felt at peace. This wasn't just the story of a medal. It was the story of a forgotten hero, a town's duty, and the truth that honor can be delayed, but never denied. We all carry unclaimed medals in our lives, unspoken thanks, overlooked sacrifices, promises left unfulfilled. Sometimes it only takes one person or one community to make them whole again, because heroism doesn't end on the battlefield. It lives on when we choose to remember.